sidekicks, well, and anybody who's interested. In all my working years, I've had stuff stolen from me over and over again. People often wonder how that's possible. There's a general perception that it's fairly difficult to steal people's stuff, especially their precious stuff. I mean, you'd never leave your car in a place where it's vulnerable with the keys in the ignition, or your house unlocked. Have you ever received a meeting request with no agenda, no possibility of what they're hoping the outcome should be, who should be there, why they should be there, no context? So, I have. And before you push that button to say extend, be careful, because poof, just like that, your friend's baby shower is stolen from you, or your son's swimming trials, or your daughter's piano recital gone. Irrecoverable. Daylight robbery, I tell you. Well, it would appear that stealing the most important stuff, which is what you own, is relatively simple, and those are your memories and the things that you could have done in the time that you've attended some odd meeting. So, and this happens because people send out these incomplete meeting requests, and you don't have an opportunity to prepare, you don't know what it's going to be about, but you're often a bit scared to inquire what it's going to be about. And on the other hand, a bit paranoid if you weren't asked and someone else has been asked. Have you ever experienced these feelings? I have, and that's what led me to clicking the accept button. So establishing meeting protocols for yourself are essential. And today's session is going to be about some ideas of what you can do when you implement a meeting or you initiate a meeting, and then hopefully others will follow you and take your lead if you're getting it right. So there's 3 core focus areas of a meeting that I'd like to cover today. The purpose of the meeting, the chairing of the meeting, and the attributes of the people attending. So those are the sort of 3 main themes that I want to go over today. There's 6 common reasons for convening a meeting. And you need to ask yourself what you're wanting to achieve before you actually send out that request. Because the meeting can be convened to either provide information, to get reaction to a proposal, to find the root cause of a problem, to agree on a plan or a strategy, to initiate a project, or maybe there's several sought-after outcomes regarding one issue in one meeting. And for those 6 outcomes required, for those 6 meeting types, if you want to call it that, there's 6 corresponding desired outcomes. So the information is delivered and clearly understood. And I think understood means everybody has a common understanding of it. It's not just somebody spewing forth their views of something, but there's a paraphrasing methodology which you use in the meeting to understand that everybody has a common understanding. Everybody has an opportunity to raise their views and have a constructive discussion, so nobody feels left out. There's an agreement of the root cause, and you have suggested solutions that you can follow up with. And then there's agreement reached, and it's been endorsed by the people in the room. So if an agreement is made, I suppose, if your agreement is reached, you can then get the people in the room to endorse it. And I think that's important. And then the views expressed, there are views that some people will have concerns over. You can deal with them then. You get commitment. And, well, maybe there's several outcomes that you're looking for. But there's definitely 6 reasons why you'd have a meeting and 6 hopeful outcomes. Okay, so I've just realized there's no need to scribble down everything I've told you, because there is a workbook and you'll be able to download it from the information below. So let's take it further. Depending on what you're wanting to achieve, who should attend? The right people, of course. And who might they be? They're people who can give approval, people who have authority to make decisions in their field, and that can never just be one person, people with special knowledge of the topic, and people who are involved in what you're wanting to discuss. So now, bearing in mind, you've got 6 reasons to have the meeting, you've got 6 desired outcomes, and you've got the right people that you need to come to the meeting. So then it's up to you. And running a successful meeting requires skill. As the chairperson of a meeting, You'll have to vacillate between various styles of chairing to achieve the best results. What would that be? So the first one is the facilitator model. And the facilitator is impartial. He or she maintains order in the meeting, makes sure that the people keep to the formal rules of the meeting and sees that everybody is treated fairly. And this model is particularly appropriate in a formal meeting. The facilitator model can also be used when discussion becomes heated in less formal meetings, when the group needs a chairperson who maintains control while they argue about contentious issues. Otherwise, guys, you're just spinning wheels. Then you get the boss model, and the boss model is the person who's in charge. He or she takes the leadership role. They see this task, they see their task as driving the whole process. They think the issues through, they guide and prompt, they propose decisions, they even decide on solutions in some instances, and then obtain the group's commitment to the solution or a notification of it. The boss model is effective when a group has no ideas of its own and needs help, or when the only other person with ideas is clearly wrong. And wrong by whose terms? Yours, of course, you're the boss. However, the downside of this approach is that overuse of it leads to groups who become dependent on their leaders for all their ideas. So just let me stop there for a minute. This is not related to your function. You don't need to be a boss to chair a meeting properly. You can chair a meeting irrespective of who you are. So there's a saying which says, lead from where you're at. What we're trying to assist with here is to help you lead effective meetings, and in doing so, teaching others to do it. So we've got the facilitator who's basically going to give people opportunity to talk, to manage the conversation. We've got the boss type of model, and this is often useful when you've got a bunch of new people in the business who don't understand the business, but you want them to be involved, to listen as, I won't say observers, but close to. You might implement the boss model. Then there's the motivator model. And the motivator is perhaps the most common and most useful approach in the corporate world, at least. The chairperson as motivator means encouraging and drawing out ideas from the groups, listening carefully, suggesting alternatives, and helping the meeting to come to a decision by reaching agreement, or even possibly just having a common view on something. So those are the three models that you need to know, and you need to know when to use them, and you need to know how to switch them quite fluently. Then you need certain attributes of the people in the meeting, and that's also important. In essence, the chairperson's profile is that of a mediator. They manage the behavior and contribution of the group so that the objective of the meeting is achieved. Remember, we had 6 objectives, 6 outcomes. And so their role is the mediator, and they also obviously have a specific voice in the meeting, but by and large, they are the people who are going to drive the meeting. Then there are 4 different distinct profiles that you can have a look at. So, one is the mediator, the other one is originators, and the other one is originators, and let me finish them. So there's the mediators, the originators, the interpreters, and the responders. And it's up to the mediator or the chairperson to make sure that the mix of the 3 other profiles are appropriate for the purpose of the meeting. So let me explain that a bit more. Different kinds of meetings require a different balance. So the originators in a meeting introduce new ideas. They bring up new concepts, come up with courses of actions into meetings. And when a meeting has an appropriate amount of origination activity, it moves forward constructively. But if too many ideas are proposed all the time, people become confused and they're unable to agree on a single idea of course of action. So conversely, if there's not enough new ideas and there's not enough suggestions, the discussions become dull and tends to get bogged down in detail. So the originators are the people who ideate, who come up with fantastic ideas. But if you've got a whole room full of ideators, you're just going to go round and round in circles because nobody can take it any further. Okay. So the mediator then steps in and they can help generate new ideas by making sure that everybody has a chance to be heard and that all ideas are fairly considered. So in a meeting, if there are too many of these originators, the mediator needs to step in and needs to give other people an opportunity to have a discussion. People who feel strongly about their own ideas should not be allowed to dominate the discussion at the expense of others with equally good ideas, but less dominant personality. This is also the job of the mediator. Origination also involves the modification of existing ideas or solutions. So if something is partially great, but needs some adjustment or it needs some addition, then you also need originators in the room. And under time pressures, it's often tempting to accept ideas as they stand, when more careful analysis and modification of the original idea can produce a superior end result, which is obviously what you're looking for. So on those occasions, the mediator needs to slow a meeting down so that the group can consider the ideas in depth instead of merely accepting or rejecting whatever is put on the table first. It is a mark of effective teamwork when a group can discuss and modify an initial proposal to produce a superior result. So we've got the mediators, we've got the originators, then you get the interpreters. So let's look at the interpreters. So the interpreters, they probe for and provide information, facts, explanations, clarifications, and ideas. So interpreting is necessary in meetings. It helps the group to develop a common understanding of the issue. However, it can be tedious and time-consuming when minor details are allowed to be examined minutely and expansively, or when too much information is given. So skilled chairing or mediation is necessary to control the balance between too much and too little information. Sharing, nevertheless, is important, and everyone at the meeting is responsible for keeping their own contributions brief. No one should dominate the discussion unreasonably. The chairperson and others can add clarity to a meeting by summarizing what has been said or agreed, both during and at the end of the meeting. The minutes will usually help with this if you need further information. If you have too little interpreter activity, this leads to disorganized meetings and hasty decisions. In such a case, if accurate meetings are not kept, minutes of the meeting are not kept, there may be disagreement on what precisely has been decided. The downside of too much interpreter activity is that meetings tend to drag on interminably. So if I just consider a meeting where you're wanting to have a discussion, so you've come up with a brilliant idea, the interpreters are the people who will probably end up implementing it, and they need to ask questions about how we're going to do it. Do we have the tools and the tactics to do it? Do we have the people to do it? But we need to spend only enough time on it to understand whether it's partially possible and not get analysis paralysis. Does that make sense? Right. So now we've got great ideas. We've got ways of putting it together. And that process has been mediated and managed through great chairpersonship. Now we have the responders, and they respond. They behave rather like voters in a referendum. They say yes or no. They are the yes or no people. They agree or disagree with the contributions of others. Too much responder activity tends to have a polarizing effect. Emotions are heightened, and as people take sides, the focus may be lost. When people respond impulsively, perhaps without thinking carefully about what has been said or proposed, misunderstandings are the inevitable result. On the other hand, when there's too little responder activity, a meeting can flounder, with people withholding their opinions, waiting to see who will be the first to express a viewpoint. And it's important to bear in mind that when the level of disagreement in a meeting is high, it does not necessarily mean that the meeting's outcome will be destructive. As long as people disagree on issues and are fully engaged in the discussion and the debate, and they don't attack each other on a personal level, the meeting can be stimulating and the outcome can be satisfactory. So Once again, this is all up to the chairperson and the moderator or the motivator to manage this process. They need to manage the level of respond activity in a meeting. They need to take into account views, feelings, opinions, and they must all be intertwined and allowed, but in balance with clarification of what the interpreters are saying so that issues are explored before being responded to. So I think something here that's important for me is that meetings can obviously lead to heightened emotions. And I think trying to, or having an understanding of how to manage emotions is a key part of being a good chairperson. When you can see things are getting out of control, that's a really good time to have a look and say, all right, let's take a step back, let's cool down, let's take a tea break, let's do something. But I think emotions are always involved, and emotions are great. That's exactly what leads to action. Without emotions, there's no action. So the balancing act between originators, interpreters, responders, by the mediator is absolutely important. There's no generic solution. Different meetings will indicate the need for a specific balance of a different type. So an experienced, skilled chairperson will be sensitive to the differences. He or she will be aware of an imbalance and will employ a tactic of diverting attention from the dominant profile, whichever that might be, to the element of the group which appears to be most happy with the dominant one. He or she will also monitor the intensity of the emotional atmosphere, and they'll be able to restore the balance while respecting conflicting views, promoting trust among the group, and, of course, maintaining control. So once again, trust is vitally important in meetings. If you don't have trust, originators are not going to share their ideas for fear of them being stolen. Interpreters are not going to give their information of how it could be implemented for the very same reason. And responders are not going to respond to what they've been asked. They're going to respond to what the general group does. So if this person seems to be the one that's in the right camp and they're saying yes, I'm going to say yes to it, even if I don't think it's possible or if I don't enjoy it. So trust in meetings is absolutely crucial. So depending on the nature of the meeting, the chairperson may find it useful to employ the chairperson's combo and switch between the facilitator, boss, and motivator role. So they have all of those. They facilitate, they can act as the boss, take a decision and say, right, we're moving off that topic now onto another one, and they can motivate to get more input from relevant people if they want. So one of the tools that we believe people should use, they should create meeting archetypes for their business. And it's vital to ensure that you have focused, effective outcomes, and these meeting archetypes assist with that. So I'm going to give you a couple of random meeting archetypes so that you can get the gist, and then I'll follow up with one that maybe people might find useful. But the following collection of meeting archetypes should help to demonstrate how the character of each meeting determines the behavior of the originators, interpreters, and responders, and how the imbalance may arise. So one of the types of meetings that we refer to is digging for roots. What is that archetype? It's a meeting with the purpose of identifying the cause of a problem. There'll be high interpreter activity because they're going to try and find out what the problem was as people share facts and views. And if the meeting is required to recommend a solution to the problem, the chairperson has to prompt the group to move into origination activity. So remember right at the beginning, we said, who are the people you need to have? If all you're trying to do is solve a problem, you just need interpreters there to find out what the problem is. If you want to solve the problem and then add something onto it to move us forward, then you need origination people. And often having the right people in the room makes a difference. So if you've got origination people there and the whole meeting is only about interpreting what the problem is, what happens then is they're wasting their time and they probably won't want to come to your next meeting. So make sure you've got the right meeting in the room. Should the group be unable to come up with a solution, the meeting will probably revert to an interpreter activity and focus even more of the analysis and take them closer to an answer. So often at this point, the boss mode needs to kick in, and they will propose a solution if there's no origination, or if you don't have originators in the room, because you're really just trying to get to the bottom of the problem. So remember, now we said this is digging for roots. So that's what we're doing. All we're wanting to do is understand what the problem is. Once we've understood what the problem is, we go to the responders and we say to them, do you agree or don't you agree? So you need responders and you need interpreters in that meeting. Maybe not origination, because the mediator might fill that role, and you'll have an origination meeting at a later stage, not to waste everybody's time. So then there's the castles in the air type of meeting. And this is really where you're trying to figure out new ideas. So you need a highly creative group of originators, and they've been tasked with, let's say, producing a plan for the new marketing strategy. The origination activity is fast and furious, and the fertile ideas flow. The group is on a roll, and they don't want to lose momentum by slowing down to consider how some or even one of the ideas might be implemented. The chairperson, aware of the excess of origination activity, there might be an excess of it, and there might not be, and the possibility that a few strong individuals may be pushing their own ideas at the expense of less strong group members, they need to shift to responder activity quickly to try and understand which of these ideas will fly and which won't, based on the responder activity. And then if you have interpreters into the room, you go into the interpretation phase of it, and you sort out if this is possible or even probable to implement. So you have castles in the air, which is high on origination. Responders are always good. And if you need to, you can have interpreters, or you have digging for roots, which is really finding a problem. And then if you need to, you can originate and get more ideas, but you also need responders. So for both of those, you need responders. Then there's a short fuse type of meeting. And this is a meeting which is contentious. And you know it's going to be the proposals on the table are likely to evoke a high level of responder activity with strong disagreement and polarization. The chairperson's imperative here is to keep the meeting from becoming stormy and emotional, and to encourage interpreter activity to make sure that people fully understand what exactly is being communicated. Once the issues are made clear and the mood is calmer, the chairperson could suggest that a decision be taken and shift the group back to responder activity, which would amount to inviting a decision by a majority vote. So you can see now quite clearly how you've got the different archetypes, and you've got the different types of people that you need at meetings and why they're important, and how as a chairperson you can shift between these. Then you also have a I Spy archetype of meeting. And this is where meetings, there's a low level of trust amongst the group. They're likely to be low on origination activity. If you recall earlier, I said for fear of ideas being stolen. And there's this lack of distrust obviously stops people from being innovative. So if you're wanting to go into an innovative meeting, but you know that everybody's distrusting each other, don't even bother. The group will display interpreter activity only, and they will be responders and interpreters, and that's all. And they will just be looking for others to blame. So meetings conducted in this atmosphere are not likely to be constructive. And a wise chairperson will sense the latent animosity and postpone the meeting. He or she will then investigate the reasons behind the problems and empathy that is required. They'll employ their management skills to sort it out before rescheduling the meeting with the same group, or maybe they'll do individuals separately and then get together once there's a common understanding. Origination activity, any activity will be low, except blaming activity. Then there's also a no comment archetype. So these are meetings with a low level of responder activity, and it's very difficult to chair. Decision makers who are reluctant to respond or make a decision simply will not commit themselves or express their views. Let us say the meeting involves a proposal put forward by a specialist. Initially, the specialist will detail the proposal, And when there is no response, he or she will expand to justify the proposal, going into more detail in the hope of getting a decision from the group. However, this group is not responsive, and the chairperson can see that the meeting will grind to a halt or sink into confusion. So they then need to take the initiative and suggest that the group would like some time to respond to the proposal and let the specialist go. The best the specialist could expect would be a rain check, and we'll let you know at a later date. Proposing a further meeting would probably invite a repeat performance, so there's no point. This is a case where scheduling the meeting was not a good idea. The specialist proposal should have been dealt with in another manner, perhaps a one-on-one meeting with a responsible and responsive higher executive. So we've now covered the purpose of the meeting. We've uncovered the best way to chair the meeting. We've looked at the people who need to be at the meeting, and we've got archetypes of meetings that you can create in your business. I think it's important for internal communication and for leadership to make meetings more interactive and more fun. So what do I mean by that? So if you send out a meeting and you say to everybody, this is a castles in the air meeting to develop the following, and there's a common knowledge of what that is, people will understand what they're coming for, and whatever pre-read you will give them, they will be able to read it in that context. If you say to people, we are digging for roots, they will understand that it's a problem-solving meeting. Maybe they'll question why they have to be there because they might not believe they're a great problem solver. But again, it means that you have interaction, and your meeting will be, it will have the right people at the meeting. You can develop all of those types of meeting yourself. So you might want to have a sales meeting, which is something like a land and expand meeting, which means we're in with these customers already. How can we expand the offering that we're giving? So everybody then understands they're going to come to the meeting, and the purpose is to say, they might be using our web services, but how can we get more business from them, and what can we offer them more? So those archetypes are really important for people to get the context of what the meeting is. And that's so the pre-read is always useful, but the pre-read often doesn't give the context of the purpose of the meeting. So that those cluster of, or that cluster of archetype, the way in which to manage the meeting, and the type of people you need in the meeting are really important to have a successful meeting. Right, so the meeting's over, and now there are minutes. And just think for a minute, the purpose of minutes is to record the conversation and actions agreed upon. So often I think the easiest way to take them is just record the meeting, and they're all digital now, and you can record it, just make sure everybody's aware. You can make simple notes afterwards, but the notes should be into, these are the 5 things that were discussed. These are the 3 decisions that were made. And these are the actions that need to be taken. And I think if you can get that mix right, you have a powerful means of transferring meaning to other people, because that's what meetings are about. You're trying to transfer meaning, you're trying to create solutions. And I think it's important to realize that there's a world of difference between a meeting and a chat. Okay, a chat is just a chat. I just want to phone you and say, how are you doing? What's happening in your life? How's your job going? It's not a meeting. A meeting it's purpose-driven. What is it that I'm trying to achieve? So the intent of a meeting is to gain understanding, obtain alignment of minds, develop a POA, plan of action, even if the POA is merely to make a decision so action and traction can follow. And often that's decision-making process is vital. So I hope you feel empowered, and you're able to manage your meetings more productively, and you look after your precious memories and your time, because you can't get that back. Once the time is gone, it's gone. So before you hit that accept button to a meeting, have a look at it and see if you can interpret what's going on in that meeting based on what we've just discussed. If not, maybe ask some questions before you accept. Otherwise, do tentative and do some research. So if you found this useful, please hit like, share, subscribe to our channels, and more importantly, talk to us. You can get hold of us either on our website, or you can contact one of us directly. Our details are on the website. We'd love to have a chat with you. And there will be a workbook. Don't forget, download it off the web. Thanks very much for your time. Good afternoon.